here. I always tell my husband I will not move 1 more mile north. He loves Minocqua, I don't. I do have a little bit of a history up in this area. So my husband grew up in Hatfield, so we used to spend a lot of time back in this area. So love the area. So I just wanted to pick up where Dale left off with rumen efficiency. And one of the big things as we're starting to come into spring and summer, one of the big lessons we have learned about rumen efficiency is changing that rumen slowly. So if we can keep some dry hay, some dry feed in front of that animal as we put it out onto pasture, we can slowly change the rumen so we're not getting those juicy squirts, because it takes about 30 days to change the rumen, and so we will lose considerable weight on animals if we just take them and put them 100% out to pasture. So we do 2 different things with our herd. Our cow calves, their winter facility that they live in, we'll let them out to pasture slow. So we have pasture surrounding where we keep them for the winter and where they get their dry hay. We'll let them out for a couple hours and bring them back, and we'll let them out for a couple hours and bring them back, and we'll do that for quite a while before we just put them on 100% pasture. And then our finishing groups of animals, or heifer groups of animals, we will take dry hay and put it in front of them every day. Just if you keep it back a couple big square bales of hay, throw a slab in the back of the 4-wheeler, break it up. It does not take a lot, but just a little bit makes a huge difference. Go feed them. They'll eat it all up. An hour later, move them. If we have time, can we get internet here and show videos?
I think so.
Okay, so if we have time, I have one farmer that I've worked with, Mary C. Anderson's worked with them too, Steph and Cody Brigham, just love them. They've come up with some really creative ways to make everything portable in their pasture. So they actually take a plastic round bale, like one of those rubber round bale feeders, flip it upside down. They took a flat rack, cut a circle, shortened the pole, and so they just keep a round bale right on there, and every day they pull it forward with the UTV with the livestock for a month or so. And it's also a great thing to do if we're starting to have drought in the summer and we want to feed a little extra supplement. So a couple ideas there. So, all right, thanks. We'll move on to my presentation.
River Country?
Pardon?
This is the one, River Country?
Yep. So Mary C. Anderson asked me, I got some conflicting things if I was supposed to talk about marketing, I think more nutrient management, a little bit about my farm, so I just threw a whole bunch of things together. So on our farm we raise 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef and direct market it all. That's where we're at today. When we started, 17 years ago maybe at our farm, we did everything under the sun. We did chickens, we did pigs, we had ducks, we had everything. The kids, we had dairy cows, a few just for home use. So it was a really great way to raise kids. It was a lot of work, and I rapidly realized when they approached middle school and want to get involved in many other things in life than the farm, I really didn't want to be at the farm too much anymore. I really realized we needed to hone in and focus on, looking at our finances and where do we make the most money, and it was very, very clear to me that it was grass-fed beef. So we kind of got out of everything else and just focused on our beef and had a little bit more time for our family. So our farm's kind of long and narrow. This is a state highway here, and this is a state highway here, and our farm is about 150 acres of ag land and about 150 acres of habitat land. So we have a lot of woods, we have some ponds, we have some prairie, we have an agroforestry planting, we have a 10-acre field that someday will be silvopasture. I think we planted that in around 2014. So this is our silvopasture planting. It's nut trees and fruit trees, and once that gets large enough to withstand grazing, we'll incorporate it in our grazing system. Currently, when we planted it, we surveyed out the lines and we made them wide enough so that we could cut 2 strips of hay in between those trees, probably for the first 10, 15 years till they're really big enough to withstand grazing. I have the hay need anyways for winter, so it worked really well for us. And it was really important to survey them out so we have straight lines so that I can go down with the hay bine, come around, come up with the hay bine, and have a good distance to width of that to work with. So all of our pastures have perimeter fence, interior fence, and water lines. We've added on to the farm over the years. So when I first came back to the farm, this was my family's farm, there were some large permanent pastures and then the rest was row crop. They did like a 30-day rotation with a small beef herd through these larger pastures, and then still ran out of pasture and did a lot of green chopping and a lot of supplemental feeding. When I came back to the farm, I had 2 little kids. I can't fix the equipment was all old. And we just decided I was learning about grass-fed and rotational grazing, and we just decided to make the switch. So we did work through the NRCS EQIP contract, cost share program, to fence this part of the farm in, plant pastures, and put in water lines. So a couple things about our farm and our water lines. This is pretty far away from our buildings. So I have no electricity back there. This is my favorite pasture. We call it the back pasture. So what we did back there was we drilled a well. The height difference from right there to right here where my water lines ends is 64 feet of elevation. So we drilled a well up here on the hill. We took an old dairy bulk tank. There's a solar panel on the well that pumps it, fills the old bulk tank, and then the water system gravity drains down the pasture. So that's a system that I absolutely love. We use no energy back there. Everything's solar, the fencer, the water line, everything. So this is just the layout of our farm. So a couple of lessons learned over the years. When I first came to the farm, these permanent pastures were all built right up tight to the fence line, save every acre we have, graze everything we have, and I spent a lot of time with a little chainsaw, my pruning shears, cutting brush off the fences because all the trees grew out into the fence and I could no longer, had a lot of issues. So when we fenced the rest of the farm, we pulled our fences all back in from the fence rows, a width that I can come around the whole farm and cut hay. So I can do two cuttings of hay again around the whole farm. I do bale first crop hay, and so the custom baler, I cut and rake it. I have a custom baler come in and bale it. He comes around the whole farm. He knows to do that first and rolls the outside of the farm. The other great thing about having the fences pulled in is we do still have a lot of fence lines on our property, which I love. And when the trees fall in a bad windstorm, they don't actually land right on my fence. I get a couple feet there. So that's pretty handy. Another thing I do is I incorporate my fence lines into my perimeter fence. So when we built this fence, there was a fence line right here. We built the perimeter on the south side of that fence line so that when we see extreme heat coming, I can kind of play with the cattle and I can get them to shade. So if I look at the weather forecast in July and it's going to be really hot, I can start the cattle at this end of this pasture and move them forward. I can put a bale of hay in here during the daytime, they'll come back during the day, and then at night lock them out. In the daytime, open the gate again and let them get back to shade. So we have multiple areas on our property where we can use the existing shade. So pretty much every pasture that we have, we can get livestock to shade when we're going to have, a week of 98-degree weather. So what I really want to be able to do to keep my fences hot is I want to be able to mow on both sides of my fences because it just has made a tremendous difference. It's also great for tourism. So direct marketing, our customers come out to the farm to pick up their beef. We pick it up from the butcher shop. They come out to the farm to pick it up from us. I have found that that's like a 98% customer retention. If I just meet somebody online and they go to the butcher shop to pick it up, they may or may not come back to our farm. If they come out to the farm and the kids are loading their meat in their car and I throw them in the four-wheeler and take them for a drive around, they're hooked. And a lot of times they'll intend to go take a look around, but they're kind of in a hurry because we just put their meat in the car, so they take off anyways, head back to the city. So perfect. We didn't spend a lot of time. We threw the offer out there. I get a lot of requests. Can I bring my grandkids back next summer or my kids back summer? And I always say absolutely, and they hardly ever come. So fantastic. Made a friend and don't have to spend a lot of time with them. So the better job we do grazing, so the more height we leave. So we like to leave a lot of residual height when we're grazing, multiple reasons, and you probably all know this, but the height of your plants, your root is about the same depth below the ground, right? So when we get dry in the summertime, if we've got more root up there, we're reaching more water, our pastures keep going. We're grazing cool season grasses, so they like cool shaded soils. So the higher our forage is on top, the cooler our soil is, the better our forage does. parasites, like, cool, wet areas. So again, they kind of live in the bottom 4 inches of the grass. So if we're grazing above that, we're not ingesting parasites. So the better job we do grazing, the more grassland birds we get, which is super cool to me. I love grassland birds. I have one paddock that sometimes there's so many birds in there, my cattle actually get scared and like run away from them, our finishing group. It's like insanely cool. But the more birds we get, the more birds we have sitting on our fence wires, and the more invasive species seeds they're pooping out underneath our fence. So I find that under fence line mowing is really important. So Randy's gonna cringe when he sees my metal T-post here. But I love my under fence line mower, and I want to be able to do it from the inside and outside, which is another reason for being able to mow on both sides of the fence. It's being able to mow right under the fence. So this is just a little more, goes off the 3-point hitch on the tractor, so I can raise it and lower it where I have topography and get the right height on it, and then runs off the PTO. So it's just a little 18-inch blade, clips right under the fence. It hits a post, boom, springs back around it, and you keep driving. It was super hard to use the first time I used it because like you spend your whole life on a farm trying not to run something over, right? So you're like 6 and dad puts you on the tractor and he gives you your little brick there so you can try to stop the tractor if he can't get you in time when you're supposed to stop, right? And he's like, now just don't run anything over. And then you have this thing and you're supposed to like slam it into the post. So you have to go really slow. You have to go in like first gear, and it was like stressful at first, but it is a lifesaver because we probably have, we have a lot of miles of fence. I think we calculated out, we have like 6 miles of fence on our property. So initially I used to hire helpers, with weed whackers to go around the farm. And when I costed it out in 2 years, I paid for this for what I was paying for weed whackers. And then if you try to get your own kids to do that, you burn them out real fast. So,
what's the brand, or what's the?
I think it's a Wright, and they came up from Texas. And actually, I lent it to a buddy because he wanted to try it out on those white posts with all the holes in them. What are those called, Bandy? Timeless, yeah. He wanted to try it out on the timeless posts to see if he could use it, and he did. It worked on them, but the bearing broke on it when he was using it. And you got to get a really specific bearing from Wright. So I called the guy and I said, hey, I need to order this bearing. And he's like, you've sold so many of these fence line mowers for me, I'm going to just send you the bearing. So that was nice of him. It saved me $200. But I love that thing. It's just a lifesaver. One time I was doing it and it was severe drought. And I was on my very back pasture, and I thought to myself, I kind of hit a rock with it, and I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? I could like start the whole neighborhood on fire. So I don't use it in times of extreme dryness, and I don't use it when it's super wet, because then I think I'll push my posts over a little bit. Mary?
What does one of those machines run?
So we bought that, like 15 years ago, and it was $2,500. I don't think they're more than $3,000 though. So like really well worth that expense. Yeah. Okay, so our water lines are actually shallow buried water lines. So what's super cool is it's kind of like the drinking fountain at school. The heifers can just go out and turn it on and get their own drink. No, that's actually just an accident. Normally they don't turn our valves, but this time one day they did. So our shallow buried water line system actually runs off of our barn well for most of the property. I have 3 different wells and 3 different water systems, but this is the old dairy barn on our farm. So we have our seasonal water lines running off of that. And they come down from the barn, the main line goes this way, and then we have lines coming off of that everywhere. And all of the lines that come off it have shut-off valves on them. So if I do have an issue somewhere, I can shut it off and fix it, when I get home from work or the next day. But I love the shallow buried lines. So one, I couldn't use my under fence line mower if I didn't have those shallow buried lines. So that's super important. It keeps the water nice and cool. I've hosted lots of pasture walks at lots of different farms, and when I see, some people say like, I have to run a sprinkler, I have to keep this running. So to me, that's a huge power waste. And other people have asked me, how are you gonna know if it leaks? So what I do before we charge it is we just get a water meter. So where we hook the water line up at first, we put this water meter on. We charge all the water lines, we stop, we put the water meter on there. We do this a week before we send the animals out to pasture. I look, and if I've lost no water, I have no leak. So I've never lost any water, so it's a good system. Then I'll go fill the first tank, and my tanks are about 60 gallons. That's the size that I easily can physically push over myself to tip it over, and then I can pick it up easily and put it in the UTV. So there's a water tank. But then it'll say like 40 gallons of water is out of my water line, my little water meter will, and those things you get at the hardware store, they cost like $12. And so I'm like, voila. The only times I've had issues are where they've screwed around with this. So you could use the quick coupler. We were like super late on our NRCS cost share and needed to get the system in, so we just went to Menards and got our supplies. So we did used to use a water wagon before we put in our shallow buried water lines. And during the summer, I could spend 2 hours a day hauling water to different groups of animals, or the kids got busier with stuff and you get home from a cross-country meet and you just got to take one more tank of water out and you got a flat tire and, those, we all remember those days. So water lines are just lifesavers. The other thing I just want to talk about really quick is wide and flexible gates. So I absolutely love these gates. I'm sure Randy could set you up with some of these. They're amazingly helpful. Love them, love them. You can kind of almost sort cattle with them. They work on sheep because they have multiple wires. They're just a super handy fence. We try to make all of our gates 30 feet wide. So if we are coming in to cut hay, maybe you can pick the round bales up on a bale barge. Those things don't turn very sharp. It just gives us a lot of flexibility. So does anybody see anything wrong with this gate right here? We always try to put our gates in the corner of the fence because, again, when I came to the farm, my brother had done a great job of fencing it all for my mom, but he put a lot of gates, this isn't actually my picture, but put a lot of gates like this, and then you're like trying to move and it's fine when you're a continuous grazer, but when you're trying to rotationally graze, it just doesn't work because what's going to happen is maybe you got some smart old cows and they're going to come through. Then you got this really nice fence to keep your calves in, and it will do that. So the cow's going to come out, now she's going to turn, and now all your calves are going to run over here, and your sheep will do the same thing. So making sure you have the proper placement of your gates is really important. So Mary C. asked me to talk a little bit about nutrient management planning for grazers. Does anybody in here have a nutrient management plan? Okay, a couple of you guys. So I see great benefit to nutrient management plans. But for the last several years, we brought a lot of speakers in from other places and maybe more into the cover crop world, excuse me, where people are saying, like, let the animals do the work. The animals do the work. They do everything on your farm. You don't need any inputs once you have animals there. And that's merely not true because we're all shipping meat, milk, hide, hoof. We're shipping that off our farms, right? So we're taking something away and we're going to have to put it back. So especially when I look at a scenario of a picture like this, boy, I don't know, these guys are grazing kind of tight and they're taking a lot away and nothing's going back. If we have a situation like this, we played with all kinds of things on our farm. We did really high density stocking or mob grazing where we'd move the cattle. You couldn't even see the kids in this pasture. It was up to about here. You can barely see that gray cow. At Timothy's all seeded out. We had tons of forage down here. So we'd move them in little paddocks 4 times a day. So there we were putting more back, but normally we're taking a lot off. So one of the benefits of the nutrient management plan is it requires you to take your soil samples. Does everybody soil sample every 3 or 4 years? Okay, we've got more hands. So it requires you. So one of the requirements, isn't it, is that you have to soil sample your whole farm every 4 years. We write our own grazing plan, and we'll get to in a minute how you guys all can too. So that's kind of a lot for us to take on, to sample 150 acres. It's going to take a day or two. And I never like to have to dedicate that much time to one thing. I like to space things out over the years. So we also interseed our pastures. We have an interseeding schedule that we follow. I'll go out and look at the pastures. I assess them all year long, but I'll look at my pastures and I'll say kind of what needs groceries where. And then I'll do interseeding in June. It's my favorite time to interseed. In August or June. But I will go out, I'll soil sample the fields that I know I'm going to interseed because those are the fields that are also going to get fertility either that fall or the next year. So it sort of breaks up my fertilizer expenses over the years, it breaks up my soil sample analysis expenses over the years, and it breaks up my time sink over the years. So some things we take into account are, if we're gonna outwinter our animals, where we outwinter. I don't actually truly outwinter in December and January because I just don't have watering facilities to handle that, but I will keep animals out as long as I can keep them out with the water wagon, which is usually around the 15th of December, and by then it's just too cold at night. That being said, I'll only do it when it's dry. So we have a lot of silt in our soils. We have a lot of sandy, silty, some clay in our soils, and we don't get frozen ground very much of the year. So this year our ground froze at Christmas time. It was froze for 2 weeks and it thawed, and it was, in the 40s in January. Then the ground froze again for about 2 weeks. So we really only had 4 weeks of frozen ground. Outwintering on non-frozen ground in southeast Wisconsin will cause a horrible compaction problem. So your sand is much more forgiving for that. So we don't do a lot of outwintering. No, we only do it when it's dry. So another thing is our farm is a family farm. So I have a sibling who's our business partner, and that's great. I'm in charge of livestock, pastures, marketing, paperwork, all the day-to-day stuff, and he's in charge of fence maintenance, building maintenance, and so it's a scenario that works really well for us. But when we talk about finances, sometimes, some people are like, oh, not that much in the checkbook, got a kid in college, deal. So another thing that's really beneficial on my farm is a landowner is eligible for a tax credit once you turn in and complete your nutrient management plan. So on our farm, we get a $10 an acre farmland preservation tax credit. And that's on all the ag land. So I have like 50 acres separate than my other 250 acres on my farm of ownership, and I didn't do a nutrient management plan on that yet. But it includes your whole farm. So with 150 acres of cropland, on that land farm it's like 140, and the rest is like woods and stuff. I still get that tax credit on my woods, so that's helpful. So that $2,500 is very helpful. So I think I'm going to skip over this and come back to that. So Mary C. Anderson and I have been working with DATCAP, and they have asked us to write a grant and we're not sure if we're going to do this yet or not. Maybe Mary C. already knows she's going forward. I think so. Yeah, it is. So maybe she wants to talk about this more, but we're going to get funding from DATCAP. It'll be for 2024, and we will be able to pay producers the cost to take your soil samples. So you'll be able to get your lab analysis on your soil samples paid for. It will be 1 sample per every 5 acres of your farm. So you'll get that cost paid for from the lab. And then we're going to be working with DATCAP to bring local nutrient management planning classes to the area. We will be able to pay you guys to attend those classes. And so I don't really like sitting down at a laptop and learning like a new computer program that I'm only going to use once a year, because I'm going to forget how to do it by the time the following year comes along, right? But DATCAP is really great about once you get your analysis back, we have this classroom setting. We have a little education on, nutrients and what they do. And then we actually just sit down, bring your laptop. They'll give you a laptop if you don't have one, and walk through the process of setting your farm up together. So it's one long day, and then you're done. But you'll get paid for your day. We think we can give relatively generous payments for that. And then once you turn your nutrient management plan into your county, you can get another payment. And then you'd be eligible for that tax credit. And then our idea is we'll keep these grants going every year, so you could have maybe this time of year everybody get back together and update their nutrient management plan and send it in. So it'll be a great way to get more nutrient management plans on your property. I can't imagine spending money on fertilizer without having a soil sample analysis to tell me what I need to put on for fertility. So that's the goal of the nutrient management plan, is to not put too many nutrients on so that we have runoff, right? But I feel like with grazers, we almost see the opposite. And I think that we do need to know what to put on. So question I get a lot is, can I write my own nutrient management plan? Yes, you can. Now, if you don't want to write your own nutrient management plan, NRCS also has equipped cost share to have a nutrient management plan written for your farm. And sometimes local county offices also have that cost share. Can I update my own nutrient management plan? Again, yes, you can, and it is super confusing because you only do it once a year. What forms do I have to fill out? Some counties are super helpful and they'll walk you through it. My county is not, but DACAP is super helpful to me. So there's definitely help out there. And then can I run into trouble if I get help? Yes. So this is how I felt when I first started trying to do my own nutrient management plan. I felt like this, and now I'm happy. So. Yeah, I have lots of other things I could share, but I'm probably about out of time. Questions?
Sorry, I came in late. That cap, what's
Oh, DACAP, I'm sorry. The Wisconsin Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. Usually we just call it the Department of Ag, I guess. Yep. Question?
Who needs a nutrient management plan, and what's the trigger? I mean, there's certain, by 1,000 acres and 5 cows, do I need this? Or?
Yep, so actually the state law says that every farmer in Wisconsin needs a nutrient management plan. That law is not enforced. It's only enforced if you are over 999 animals on your farm and you're considered a confinement farm, a CAFO. Then as part of your DNR permit to open your farm, you have to turn in your nutrient management plan. But it is a requirement that all farms have them. It's just not an enforced requirement.
How long has it been, kind of been out of the loop? How long has it been that was required?
Mary C?
2008.
Yeah, 2008 is the answer. The nutrient management plans have been required since 2008.
Currently, there's only 30% of the farmers that have